Hi, everybody, and welcome to Ross-Ade Stadium for the Purdue Boilermakers and the Indiana State Sycamores. Tim Newton along with Kelly Kitchel and Pete Quinn. We're about an hour and a half away from kickoff and what should be an interesting Saturday afternoon. Purdue trying to even its record at 1-1 after a disappointing loss last week to Penn State, while Indiana State comes in off an overtime win last week over North Alabama. And Kelly Kitchel has been an Indiana State team that has had to overcome a great deal. Back on August 21st, there was a one-car crash involving 5 student athletes, including 4 football players. 2 of the athletes that were in the crash were killed, along with the non-football playing student. And the 2 football players that did survive the crash have both had major injuries and are going to have a long rehab. Hard for any school to go through that, any program to go through that, but right before the season, that was a devastating blow for the Sycamore program. Absolutely, and yeah, you feel bad. It's just something you never want to have happen to anybody, and it was just a weird deal. And one of them was a local guy here, Omarion Dixon, played football at Harrison, terrific running back at Harrison, just a absolute stud. And they said if he wasn't in such good shape and as strong and as physical as he was, he may not have survived. And we're just so happy that he did, you know. And I know he was at the game last night with Harrison, and it meant a lot to his teammates and for them. I'm sure he was happy to be around some of those guys. So just a devastating blow for the program for sure, and one that you never want to have happen ever. Pete, anytime a program goes through a devastating problem or tragedy like that, it tends to bring people closer together. And it was actually heartwarming to see this Indiana State team come through with a win last week, just less than 2 weeks after the accident happened.
Yeah, it is, and it's. I like playing Indiana State. I think it's good for Purdue to do that, to support them. They'll make more money from this game than probably the rest of their season, and I like supporting the Sycamores. When I was a student at Purdue, and when I think of Indiana State, the things I remember about Indiana State is they had the best basketball player in the world named Larry Bird.
Yeah.
They had the greatest gymnast in the world in Kurt Thomas, and they had the greatest wrestler in the world, Bruce Baumgartner. All there, that was Indiana State's golden era, and their homecoming queen, Helen Tarpey, was a friend of mine from high school. So I have very, very good memories of Indiana State. I like playing them. I think we're going to have a little bit of a different situation today, if you guys remember, and I know you do, when Coach Darrell Hazel was our head coach. Ricardo Allen, I think, got a game-winning interception to seal the game, but I don't think it's going to be that type of game today.
Repressed memories, Pete. Repressed memories here.
Yeah, I know. That was a little bit of a repressed.
By the way, it's not the last time we're going to see Indiana State. We'll see them again here in 2024 and 2026. In 2023, 25, and 27, they'll play at Indiana. So they've got one of these Big Ten games each of the next 6 seasons. We're going to break some injury news today for Purdue. We saw last week Brock Thompson was injured in that game, injured a knee. He's a game-time decision. Joe Anderson had COVID earlier this week. He's also a game-time decision. Elijah Canyon, wide receiver, Auburn transfer, is definitely out, and I think the one that will surprise people, Jalen Graham is out of today's game with an injury. Chris Jefferson will move up into his spot, and Sanusi Kane slides into the starting lineup.
Yeah, and well, I mean, that's a devastating, for Jalen, and we, hope he gets speedy recovery for him for sure. And I think he's probably the best defensive player we have on the team, and so that's a devastating one. But I'll tell you what, I thought Sanusi Kane played really, really well last week, and I'm happy that he's going to get more time on the field. He's a hard hitter. I like the way he plays, so I think that's for him to get him on the field more, it'll be a good thing. But that was some tough news to hear when you first got in here about Jalen.
Pete, if my count is correct, Purdue played 60 players last week in the opener against Penn State. 14 players were making their debut, and we saw them go 12 deep on the defensive line, 8 deep on the offensive line. So with an injury like a Jalen Graham and like some of the others we're talking about, there is some depth behind those frontline players.
I don't think people realize what an amazing job Jeff Brom and his staff have done. Purdue would not have survived injuries to key players in the last 30 years. And now we can, because we do have talent 2 deep at most positions, 3 deep at some positions. So we can survive the receiver position. We've got some very, very high-level receivers that aren't playing, and you just, next guy up. Well, everybody says that, next man up.
Yeah.
It actually works at Purdue. So I think Purdue's in a really, really good spot. I think this is good to play Indiana State today because a lot of the younger guys will get some snaps and get some playing time. But I can see us going 2 to 3 deep all season long. And the thing that excites me the most, last week hurt. It took me till Wednesday to get over that loss because I felt like we were the better team. And when I was prepping for the Penn State game and I was looking through their lineup, they have very few kids that weren't 4 stars. We don't have very many 4 stars. And the fact that I felt like we were the better team says a lot about the program we have here at Purdue. I'm very excited about today getting to see some of these younger kids because they're going to help us later on in the season. I think our younger grades have a lot more talent than our older grades, but we'll see. But today's going to be a good opportunity for them.
But how about going 60 deep against Penn State?
Yeah,
that's unreal. I mean, usually you can get guys in against an FCS opponent or a blowout and things, but I mean, a tight game going back and forth. The trust of the staff to go, to the 4th string on the defensive line, and that's unreal. That's unheard of, kind of, and to play 8 O linemen.
And I'm going to interrupt our play-by-play man, the voice of Purdue, to ask you a question because I'm real interested in hearing the answer. Of all the units, all the different positions, what were you the most impressed with last week?
That's a good question. I thought the defensive line held their own really well, and I'll tell you, until probably the last drive, I thought the O-line played pretty well, even going 8 deep on that. But I think our D line is really, really, really good. I think that
I was overwhelmed with their offensive line.
Yeah,
I really was, and I think that once I think AOC O'Connell, once he understands he's got an elite line in front of him, and I think they have a chance to be elite, that he's going to be a little bit more patient. You heard Coach Brahm talk about he threw the ball a little bit too quick sometimes. He threw off his back foot sometimes. I think he's going to realize he's got some pretty good guys up front in the line, and we're pretty deep in the line. I think Purdue has a chance to be really, really good this year because of the O-line. And I agree with the D-line too, but I was more impressed with the O-line.
Let's give a quick shout out to some of the folks watching today on Facebook. We've got Hillsdale, Michigan, Bargersville, Indiana, Fort Wayne, Anna, Texas, Cocoa, Phoenix, and Austin. And Daniel from Austin says, we were in West Lafayette for the game last week. You and about 40 or 50-some thousand other people. Great atmosphere. I don't know if we're going to be able to match that today. But I thought the students came out, and I was most impressed with the students who got here early. And unlike other institutions where most of the fans left at halftime, ours stayed until the very last play.
Yeah, it was a mess trying to get out of here. I talked to a lot of people trying to get out of here because everyone, it was midnight. After midnight, I couldn't believe. I remember there were about, 3 minutes to go in the game, and I heard Rob come on and said, hey, we got to do another station ID. I said, oh, my gosh, is it midnight right now?
Yes, it is.
I couldn't believe we had hit that 4-hour mark, and then everybody stayed to the end, so then trying to get out all at once because everybody was tired and disappointed after the game. But I made this comment before, during, after, and all week how impressed I am with the student section and our home fans. I mean, gosh, you look around the stadium, everybody was on their feet the entire game. Everybody was into it. It was loud. It was raucous. And, that third quarter was about probably as electric as I've seen it in here in a long time.
Pete, I think a lot of us were kind of curious to see who was going to step up with David Bell now in the NFL, who's going to be your alpha receiver. I think there were a lot of hopes for Charlie Jones coming into the season. I don't know if anybody would have said 12 catches, 153 yards, and a touchdown on opening night.
Well, they started playing football together. Aidan O'Connell and Charlie Jones in grade school. They were on the same football team. He was a receiver. Aidan was a quarterback, so they've got a great relationship. It made me look like a genius because I was telling all my friends, watch for this Charlie Jones kid. I think he's going to be special. And he was special, and he had opportunities. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I think he was targeted 19 times.
19 times.
19.
Yeah.
When you get 19 opportunities, he's going to make plays. I think what we're going to see today is you're going to see Aidan O'Connell spread it out a little bit more, even though he went to multiple receivers. And I think you're going to see why I was looking at the kickoffs for Indiana State. They had 4 kickoffs last week, and only 1 was a touchback. We might see his preseason All-American kick returner do something special on the kick returns today.
Well, that was one of the questions Jeff Brown was asked earlier this week. We thought that Charlie Jones might not have a fair catch all season, and he had several on Thursday and a couple where he might have had an opportunity. I think part of that was he was exhausted.
Yeah,
Kitch.
agreed.
Yeah, I mean, you get 19 targets and playing as many snaps as he did, and I mean, and he felt it after the game. He got hit a lot too, but he's a tough kid. I think he came up a little limping on one play, went in tent, came back out, was right back on the field. I'm excited for him. I think he's one of those guys. To me, he looks like one of those NFL inside receivers that can do a lot of dynamic things, but his burst, when he comes out of a break and separates from the defender, I mean, he had some of the best corners and safeties on him in the country last week, and he was able to separate and get himself open 12 times for catches, and probably three or four more times where they were holding him and may or may not have got a call there.
Littlestown, Pennsylvania, and Murrieta, California, checking in. If you've got questions for us, we've got a few minutes before we need to get on the air tonight or this afternoon. So put those in the chat part of the Facebook page, and we'll get to those. Pete, I thought Aidan O'Connell was okay Thursday. He was 30 of 60 were his final numbers, 50%. And I thought, watching the game live, and then Jeff Brown thought after watching, he threw the ball a little bit earlier a couple of times than he needed to throw it.
He did, and to put this in perspective, because to me this is my 31st year. This is the most amazing stat I've ever heard. Aidan O'Connell last year set the single season record for completion percentage at 71.8%. Okay. Which was fourth best in the country. What makes that amazing is second place is David Blau with 66%. I mean, that's 6% difference between first and second place. So last year he was absolute money. He was setting records all over the place. 50% is not Aidan O'Connell. I don't think we'll ever see it, and I think it's a combination of things. I think he's got a lot of new receivers. They really had to change their offense, and I don't think people understand how important Miller was, backup tight end. They had to change their offensive strategy a lot because they had a lot of two tight end sets. And he had a lot of new receivers, and it was his first game, and he's going against probably the best secondary, arguably. Maybe Wisconsin just because of who their coach is. Leonard's an amazing coach. But he had a great secondary, so I don't think we'll ever see him even sniff 50% again. But 50%'s okay for some quarterbacks, not for him.
One of the things that I was really interested in Thursday night, Purdue played, we mentioned 8 different offensive linemen. A lot of them shuffled. We saw one play that was a touchdown, 7 offensive linemen on the field, Kitch. That had to be the heaviest huddle in college football history.
Yeah. Who was it last year? I think it was Iowa that may have done that too last year. I saw them a few times. Oh, it was Minnesota. Minnesota has done that a few times in the last few years, and you're right. That is a lot of guys. And shoot, you might as well give the ball to one of them if you're on 7 of them on the field and see what happens. See if they can put 320 pounds behind 2,000 pounds and see if you can get in the end zone. And but that is a lot. And I'll tell you, they scored a touchdown on it too.
Right,
and I thought what I loved about that was when we got near the goal line against Penn State, great defense. They didn't have to throw the football. Right. They were able to run the football inside the 5, get a touchdown, and get out of there. And that's what I thought that was one of the most important things. That goes back to Pete's point on what you're most impressed with. I agree with you. That offensive line, especially on the goal line, they were smelling it and feeling it and wanted to get in the end zone.
Deep. They're the deepest line. When the Matt White, the Drew Brees line, 5 of his linemen played in the NFL a minimum of 5 years. That was a special group of kids. I think this group has that chance. I think there's 7 or 8 guys that have a chance to play on Sundays.
And if you look at that offensive line right now, Eric Miller's in his 5th year, but he does have another year that he could take. If he decides to come back, Purdue brings the entire starting offensive line back next season.
And maybe the younger guys, Bo, I think, is just turning heads.
Oh, Bo's a pro.
He's a pro, yeah. I think Gus is too.
Yeah.
I mean, we have an elite line, and that was always. I remember Joe Tiller's first year. We were doing his call-in show, and some guy called up and he goes, "Coach, last year we had the worst offensive line in the Big Ten. This year we have the best. It's the same guys. What'd you do?" And it was a great question because it was Matt White and Chucky Okobe, and they have these guys, and if you put them in the right position, and you have a playbook that you're able to utilize their talents, you can be a very, very special offense. And I think there's nothing that happened last week that dampened my enthusiasm for the season other than the fact we didn't win.
Yeah.
If you didn't care who won, it's one of the best games in the country.
Comment here from John, and I would agree with this. Thought King Daru looked very good last week.
I did
we
too.
saw King Daru down at the goal line. This was really important last week. Break a couple of tackles and get into the end zone.
And it wasn't just on the goal line. He did that in midfield. He did it all over. He wasn't going down on first contact. And, you know, one of the things about King is we don't see him having that breakaway speed. But if you can break 2 or 3 tackles and get 7, 8, yak yards after contact, that's a big deal. And we were wondering, is there going to be another running back? Who's going to kind of come in? I think he kind of established him. I'm the guy, and he can be the guy.
Tim, I'll add to that comment only because earlier when I said that Aidan O'Connell, once he realizes he's got more time because this line is really good, I will say the same thing about King and the other running backs, because there was a couple of times where there was a massive hole where the offensive line just blew the Penn State defenders off the line of scrimmage, and you could have drove a truck through those holes, and King was just a split second late getting there. He's going to see that on film, and he's going to know I can go full speed because my guys will take care of me, and there's going to be space there. So I think we're going to continue to see the running game get better and better. And in fact, that's going to be one of my keys to the game today is let's get the running game going because I think we have a chance to be pretty good. By
the way, on a day that doesn't feature a lot of premier college football matchups, early in the fourth quarter now in Austin, Texas is leading Alabama 13-10. And Alabama knocked out Texas' starting quarterback in the first quarter.
Yeah, Ewers is out.
It's going to be interesting to see if they hold on. We haven't really talked a lot about Indiana State. One player that's worth keeping an eye on the defensive side is Jeffrey Brown. He's their middle linebacker. He's number 2. He's out of Fishers, Indiana. 15 tackles last week against North Alabama, and he was kind of the heart and soul of their defense. So it'll be interesting to see how he fares today against what we think is a pretty good offensive line.
Well, that's going to be the biggest difference. I mean, Purdue's a whole nother beast compared to North Alabama, and if these guys, the speed of the game is going to be so much faster, and that's what you have to, Purdue has to play to the same level they played last week. They can't play down to the competition, and that's where you talk about keys to the game. I think that's one of the biggest factors is they just have to play their game, and we have to play on top and on speed the whole time.
Well, the other thing to mention about Indiana State is in their opener, they had 15 tackles for loss. And it was spread out. It wasn't 1 or 2 guys.
8 sacks.
Yeah, they had 8 sacks for 67 yards. 11 players had a tackle for loss. So it's a swarming defense. Kitch is right. They don't match up. I'll tell you what I like about Indiana State is when you look at their roster, if you're from Indianapolis like I am, it's Indianapolis. They come from very, very solid programs. They're football players. The big difference between an Indiana State and a Purdue is there's not a huge difference in the first teams. There's a pretty big difference in their second teams.
They have more than 50 players on their roster from the state of Indiana, so this game is going to be meaningful.
And good programs.
Yes. By the way, Texas just kicked another field goal. 16-10 Texas now over Alabama.
I get this feeling you're rooting for Texas.
I'm just rooting for a good game. And now to see Nick Saban lose, would that ruin my day? It would not. It would not. But I'm just, just throwing that out there. There are great things about sports that we love, and one of the things is when a guy has an opportunity to play on the big stage. Chris Jefferson is a kid that came from Findlay.
Yeah.
He was a Division II All-American twice, and said, you know what, I want to see if I can play in the Big Ten. He can play in the Big Ten.
He can play in the Big Ten, and he came up in one of the biggest spots that we needed him there. And I'm just glad I got past him on the sideline before he let loose there on the sideline too last week.
If you haven't seen the film, if you want to see what Gatorade looks like in reverse, Chris Jefferson last week, there was a national trend on Twitter of puke 6. He had the puke 6. He had an interception, and then he just lost all the Gatorade in his body.
I just walked past him too. I was so glad I was on the other side of that one down there.
Didn't he have like 14 interceptions?
He has 14 career interceptions now and 2 pick sixes.
Yeah.
So and we had him on the Jeff Brom show earlier this week. Great, bubbly personality and the kind of kid that's really easy to root for.
Yeah, and you saw that a little bit in the spring, and I'm excited for him because I think he's one of those guys that just seems to be in the right spot all the time, and he's going to be a lot of fun to watch this season.
I'm going to give you guys, and not you guys, I'm going to give our audience, they're all Purdue fans, something to be excited about, something I was contemplating this week. Jefferson came from Findlay. We have 26 transfers on our team. We had 12 just last year, and many of them are playing very, very meaningful roles. Arguably, we'll see as the season progresses, but arguably our top 2 receivers are transfers from Iowa. There's that possibility. Here's my thought process. In the age of NIL, in the age of you can transfer anytime you want, if you get a poison ivy, you can transfer. I think Purdue has a competitive advantage for the first time since I've been associated with a school, since was before the turn of the century. Kids like Jeff Brom's offense. They like their defense. They see Purdue football and they said, you know what, I want to be in that offense. And I think Charlie Jones is a perfect example. He had more targeted throws to him last year than he ever had in 4 or 5 games at Iowa. And they want to play for Jeff Brom, and they want to have an opportunity to show what they can do. I think Coach Brom and his staff are really going to benefit from the transfer rule. I'm not a huge fan of that rule. I wish they had to sit out a year. That's not the rule anymore. I think Purdue's going to benefit from that, and I think every year we're going to have 2 or 3, 4 or 5 players that weren't on our team this year that will have a meaningful role at Purdue. So it's going to be very, very interesting to watch that over the next few years to see who comes to Purdue.
Well, we know the Boilermakers are a prohibitive favorite today. If you've looked at the latest line, it's, I think, 35 points. So it may be a similar situation to last year, maybe, in the game against UConn. And in that game, Kitch, we saw the starters basically play the first half, and then Jeff went to the reserves in the second half, including at the quarterback position. We saw 4 different quarterbacks in that one. I think it'll be interesting if they can get a big lead today. What order do we see those quarterbacks in today?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's established Austin Burton is the number 2, but then when you go 3, 4, is it going to be Alimo? Is it going to be Brady Allen? Where are those guys going to fit in? And yeah, it'll be very interesting to see how he subs in and out, and hopefully we'll get in that situation, because I think that this is a game that Purdue needs to be in that situation. They've got to establish that piece of it. So I think you're right. It will be. I'll be keeping an eye out to see who's warming up harder.
I'm rooting for Christian Galoff just because I'm friends with his dad.
There you go. Huntsville, Alabama, Cicero, Indiana, San Diego, California, and another one from Austin, Texas. So thanks again for tuning in. Again, we'll be back with Facebook Live 2 weeks from today. Homecoming game on the 24th against Florida Atlantic, and our Facebook Live segment that day will be at 6 o'clock for a 7:30 kickoff. All right, we got a couple of minutes left here before we get to our picks to click. Special teams, we didn't see a lot last week, and I thought that was one area that Penn State, their coverage, Pete, was as good as we've seen in a long time.
Well, their third teamers are 4 stars, so they have great athletes on the field, and they had great coverage. I think today we're going to see a huge domination by the Boilermakers in the kicking game for that reason. Their place kicker last week went 3 for 3, but they were all under 30 yards. But you can't they're not kicking the ball in the end zone, so we could see something special there. And on the punt team, maybe see something special there. But we've got very good special teams. This might be the game we see how special they can be.
Here's a good leading question to our picks to click. It comes from Micah in Phoenix. What other receivers outside of Charlie are you looking to step up?
Well, I'll give you my pick to click on offense.
Here's
I'm
a
really
t-shirt.
hoping that I'm taking Pete's because he took both of mine last week. But
that's why we flipped the chairs this week. I wanted to make sure Kitch got first crack this time.
But I think the guy I'm looking for this week as my pick to click is a guy that I watched all spring. I thought he was, before Charlie got here, I thought he was the best receiver that we had coming in. They put him all over, and that's Tyrone Tracy. I think you're going to see him more involved in the game today. You may see him in the backfield some. You're going to see him around the field. But I think Tyrone Tracy is a guy that is going to get more touches this week and has a chance to be special.
I like that pick. I think Tracy is the one thing people don't understand is Jeff Brom's one of those rare coaches. You have coaches that do coach speak. Mm-hmm. Jeff Brom's not wired that way. If you really listen to what he's saying, he's going to tell you what he's going to do. Mm-hmm. And one of the things he mentioned this week is we underutilized Tyrone Tracy, and we're going to utilize him more, and I don't think just as a receiver, but in the backfield as well.
I think Mershawn Rice has also shown that if he can stay healthy, and that's been a big if in his career so far, he's got a guy that has a lot of talent.
Is that your offensive pick?
Sure.
There you go.
Kitch has to go first here.
Well, he already did.
I went
You went with Tracy.
Give me your defense.
All right, defensive, I'm going to go with Sanusi Kane because I just love the way he flew around last week, and he had a hit that I talked about on the sideline. There's hits that you hear and there's hits that you feel. I felt that one from the sideline, and he came flying up, and I'm excited about him. I actually just walked by him on the field, and he had a good look in his eye, and so as I walked by him, I was like, that's my guy today.
There you go.
So I'm looking for him to step into that starting role and be a real game changer today.
I like both those picks. I'm going to go with the guys you guys wanted last week for offense because I think he was underutilized last week, and we got to make him part of the offense because he's a huge part of Payne Durham. Mm-hmm. I think Payne is going to have a special day today, and on defense, I was going to go with Jalen Graham. I can't. So I'm going to go with a guy that has more starts than all the other Purdue players, and he sometimes goes underappreciated because he plays in an underappreciated position. But Lawrence Johnson, I think Lawrence Johnson, who is starting his 26th game today for the Boilermakers, I don't think they're going to be able to block him. I think he's going to do some special things.
All right, I already said Mershawn Rice, although I do think King Daru may have a big day today running the football.
I like that.
On the defensive side, one of the goals that Cam Allen has in his Purdue career is to get a pick six. Maybe today's the day. He's got 7 career interceptions, still looking for that first pick six. And again, maybe he would keep his dinner in.
Maybe the most underappreciated player on our roster. He just goes out and does the job every week, but we don't really talk about him enough.
Well, tickets are still remaining. It's going to be a beautiful day, a little warm, a little muggy, but it's a great day for football here at Ross-Ade. So if you're in the vicinity, come on in and join us again. We'll be here next 2 weeks from now for the homecoming game against Florida Atlantic. That'll be a 7:30 kickoff, so our Facebook Live segment will be at 6 o'clock. For Kelly Kitchel and for Pete Quinn, I'm Tim Newton. Have a great weekend, and boiler up.
Boiler up.